I've noticed something about myself lately that I'm not really very proud of. I'm getting selfish, and I think living on my own is not helping. My daughter WhatsApped me and said she's got a broken tooth and she's been trying to find a dentist to do an emergency filling for her. And she said to me, I've got one on Tuesday, Mum. Can you come and babysit for Theo while I'm in the dentist? And instead of immediately thinking, wow, great, I get to spend an hour of my time with my grandson, it was like, oh, right. Kind of response to it. Not that I said that to her, because I would do anything for my children. Of course I'm going to go and babysit if I'm needed. But I just wanted to really have a deep explore to understand why I'm feeling like this. I think I have an idea, and if you want to find out what that is, please stick around. Well, that's more plants watered. Still got a few more to go. Selfishness. Why do I think that I'm becoming selfish? Well, apart from my initial reaction to what my daughter had asked me to do, when they talk about going to have a family lunch or go out for the day or something along those lines, I take a minute to process my thoughts, and they are generally around the same kind of thing. Oh no, that's going to be out of my comfort zone, or oh no, I've got plans. I'd made plans. And it's crazy because my family are the most important thing to me. So I'm just trying to understand myself. And I probably need to explain a few things about myself to get you to where I am. So my mum has said to me on very many occasions that I was a very independent child, and she felt that I never needed her, which is crazy because she's always been my idol. But I'm wondering, because I'm an introvert, if that's where it all started. So I was always a bit of a loner as a school kid, I guess. I had one friend who didn't live very close to me, so I didn't get to see her very often. And I spent a lot of my time on my own. Oh yeah, sometimes I play with my sisters, but they're a bit younger than me. I think there's about 3 and 5 years difference between us. So I played on my own. When I say played, I had a record player. I had some, little 7-inch records. I read a lot of books when I was a kid. And I basically entertained myself. Didn't really watch an awful lot of television because that's when television was only on for kids for like between 3 and 5 or something like that. So I was always alone. So when I reached the grand old age of 16, I met my first boyfriend, who then became my ex-husband. And I fell head over heels and completely thought the sun shone out of his. So I thought he was the bee's knees. And it took me a very, very, very long time, probably about 15 years, before I realised that he was a bit of a narcissist and extremely selfish, because I always had to be putting his needs above mine. Like, he was one of these people that didn't like to stay at home, and he always wanted to be out on the go, and he wanted me to go with him, and he wanted me to dress in a certain way. So I always had to do what I was told, which I'm not particularly very good at, but for some reason I allowed him to mould and shape me as a young teenager into my early 20s. So when we got married and started a family, I absolutely threw everything that I had into my kids. And that meant not going out with him so much. So of course, well, I say of course, I mean, not every marriage goes through this, but he then started thinking that he could get some fun elsewhere or have other people, other girls, do what he wanted them to do. But I was in my little bubble. I was in my own little world of motherhood. I was quite happy staying at home looking after my children as they came along. And I was completely unaware that any of this was going on because I was pouring so much into my kids. Probably not so much into being a wife, but, sometimes you've got to shift one priority into another one. Anyway, to cut a long story short, he left me for somebody else, and I was completely devastated. The bottom dropped out of my world, and I didn't really know what to do with myself because my little dream of having, husband, house, family, white picket fence, all the rest of it just disappeared. And it took me about, a couple of days to realise that my kids needed me to be there at the front. So I took all of the upset and the emotional grief that I had for the end of the relationship, and I threw it into my children. It didn't, I think I suppressed most of the emotions that I was going through. I hit rock bottom and I had to come back up again. But they helped me through a very difficult point in my life. Throwing my emotions and everything physically into my children and running the house and making sure that everybody was happy became my coping mechanism. And I don't think I realised that I'd done that to the extent that I did until my children grew up and started leaving home. And I wasn't on my own for very long, because I'd met somebody and we decided I was going to move in with him, and he lived a few counties away, so it was literally upping and leaving my hometown, which again, when I look back in hindsight, is me trying to please him. I wanted the relationship so desperately that I would move away from my children, which was the worst mistake ever. But I think that not understanding that I'd suppressed all these emotions and that I pushed everything into looking after my children and, coping, and in that time I'd gone back to work. I'd done some training and I'd gone back to work in finance departments off. I'd had 10 years off. So that was kickstarting my career again, which was to make me independent, and that was probably one of the best things that I'd done. So how do I explain this? So I'd been living away from my children for roughly about 5 years, obviously coming backwards and forwards to seeing them, visiting, but it's not quite the same. And things had gone up and down, a bit like a roller coaster, with this new man. And one day everything sort of came to a head, and I think it was a combination of him and myself. And I left, and I came back to my town, and I got myself a flat, and I moved in. And that was now completely the first time that I'd ever lived on my own, completely, having to pay my own bills and all that comes with what comes with living on your own, solo, and keeping yourself safe, security-wise. I think as the months went on and I began to relax and to grow into myself as I was then, I'd gone through the menopause and I'd gone through all of the emotions that had come with that, and that's probably another video to talk about. For some reason, it just seemed to go into overdrive. I seemed to want to just, snuggle into myself and just hibernate and be a hermit, basically, and not wanting to go out. I was working at that point, and I was working in an office, so I did have to go out every single day. But I just didn't like it. It was too noisy. There were too many people in the office, all on phones. So once COVID had hit and we were all at home, I decided that I really wanted to start my own bookkeeping business, which I did. And again, more independence for me. I didn't have to go out to work, although that employer then became my very first client. But I was able to become a recluse. And I didn't realise at the time, but that was kind of like a backfire on what was going on with me. So my kids started to make comments like, "We never see you. You've moved back, but we see you even less than we did before." So I took that bit on board and became a little bit more self-aware about this. But I think the selfishness has crept up again, and I don't want to go back to the way that I was. So if I'm asked to babysit, then I immediately say yes. I don't allow my mind to go, no, you don't want to do that, you don't want to go out, you don't want to change your plans, etc. But it's in my nature now not to participate in things that I'm invited to. So I always say no, but I miss out. And so I've got to, train myself to stop that and to come back into the family world again, I guess. I'm having to make a lot of trips down to see my mum now that she is declining in her health. So that's kind of helping in a very weird kind of way. So I have given myself 12 months to work on myself. I want to give myself 12 months break to find out about myself, to find out what I want from life. One of those is getting healthier, and exercising and trying to lose some weight, working on myself, trying not to be so selfish. At the moment, where I'm living on my own, I'm not sharing and I'm not having to compromise. I also don't have somebody who's challenging me. There's no one to challenge my behaviours. Living as a solo is completely different to living with somebody else, where you have to make room for other people. Even time, you've got to split your time. Whereas at the moment, I can do whatever I want to do. And I'm not saying that healthy relationships, you can't do what you want to do. Of course you can. Am I worried about my selfishness? Yes, I am. And I want to work on it because I don't want it to impact my family life. But I also do think that it's quite healthy to protect your boundaries. You just have to find that sweet spot, don't you? You just have to make sure that you're not going over, or I'm not going overboard with it. I am checking in with myself. I'm asking myself, am I too inflexible? Is it impacting my family? Am I finding it harder to connect with other people? So if my daughter asked me to babysit for her again, I'm not going to sit there and think, oh, I've got to drive to the next town. I've got to find parking. I've got to look after a toddler for an hour. I've got to say to myself, or remind myself of the value that hour out of my time, my day, how much value my daughter would get from that. And obviously the value of me having that extra hour with my grandson, it would be the reward in itself. And I think it's my brain, my mindset. I've got to be more positive, I think, and pull myself out of this recluse attitude that I've got, and be a bit more engaging into the world. Yes, I can live completely on my own, independently, and not need anybody or anything for any issue at all. But I shouldn't. I keep having to remind myself that I shouldn't. I want to. I keep being pulled in that direction. I think this is all a result of me having given 1,000% to my children when their father left, and having to recover from that broken relationship and not wanting to disintegrate in front of my children. And I think burying all that emotion has not been very good for me. So I've got to unpick that, my defense mechanism of the time, and get back into the world. I think it had an impact on that past relationship, and I certainly don't want it to impact on any new relationship. So my takeaway from this is balance is important, and independence doesn't mean isolation. So I've got to get the rewards from my family. I've got to get that into my head, and I've got to pull myself out of this little hole that I've dug myself into. And I'm sure I will. I've got time. I'm not being hard on myself. I'm trying to improve, and that can only be a good thing, can't it? So if any of you have been through this and you've got some suggestions for me, then please let me know. It'd be great. Well, one, to know that I'm not the only person who's feeling like this, but two, also to know that there's support out there. So am I selfish? What do you think? It's difficult to know, isn't it, when it's just you? It'd be great to know how you got yourself out of it, or whether you think this is just normal and natural. It'll be good to know. So thank you for watching. My name is Julie, and I hope you'll check out some more videos of mine. Take care.